The Galactic Overlords' unfamiliar threat emerges. The galaxy was once a peaceful and controlled place. The Galactic Overlords, rulers of countless star systems, had maintained power for centuries. Their ships patrolled every corner, their influence stretching far and wide, untouched by any threat. The Overlords believed they were the true masters of the universe. No one could challenge their rule. For years, they had crushed any sign of rebellion or resistance with ease. Whether it was a rogue species or a pirate fleet, they always had the upper hand. The Overlord ships were advanced beyond measure, equipped with weapons that could wipe entire planets off the map. Their technology was far superior to anything the galaxy had ever seen. But something was happening, something they couldn't understand. A strange signal had appeared on their scanners, a disturbance deep within the edge of their empire. It wasn't a normal transmission, but a series of irregular pulses that defied all known patterns. The Overlords, always calm and collected, exchanged uneasy glances. There had never been a signal like this before. At first, they ignored it, dismissing it as just another random glitch. But the signal continued, and it grew stronger. It seemed to be getting closer. The Overlords' top commanders gathered in the command center, where a massive holographic map of their empire flickered above a long, polished table. The room fell silent as the signal on the map grew clearer. "Where is this coming from?" asked the lead strategist, his voice tinged with concern. "It's coming from deep in the fringe regions," said one of the officers, eyes fixed on the map. "But it's not from any known civilization. It's not even a signal we've encountered before." The Overlords had long dismissed the outer fringes of the galaxy as unimportant. They had never worried about the farthest edges of their empire. These regions were home to little more than uncharted planets and unremarkable species. But now something strange was happening. The signal was persistent, and as it grew stronger, it was clear that it wasn't going away. The lead strategist's mind raced. Could this be a new threat? Or worse, could it be a trap? Another officer spoke up. "The scanners picked up movement near the signal. Something massive is approaching." The words hung in the air. Something massive. The Overlords had faced enemies before, but none had ever been a match for their fleet. What could possibly threaten them now? A new set of readings appeared on the map, confirming the worst fears of the Overlords. A fleet was emerging, but not one they had ever seen. It wasn't like anything in their records. There were no known signatures, no familiar ships. The fleet was enormous, its power readings off the charts. But there was more to it than just the unknown vessels. It was the speed and precision of their movements that truly alarmed the Overlords. "This fleet, it's moving with purpose," the lead strategist said, his voice growing more frantic. "It's heading directly toward us, with no signs of slowing down." "Could it be humans?" one officer whispered, the thought barely forming in his mind before it was spoken aloud. The room went still. Human forces had long been considered weak and insignificant by the Galactic Overlords. The human race had been confined to their small corner of the galaxy, never posing any real threat. But now, the Overlords were questioning everything they thought they knew. The signal grew louder, and the Overlords could feel the weight of it pressing against them. This was no ordinary fleet. It was something far more dangerous. They had spent centuries conquering and controlling the galaxy, but they had never faced anything like this. The fear in the room was palpable. No one had ever expected a threat like this to emerge from the depths of space. The first ship of the human fleet entered their space. It was unlike anything the Overlords had ever seen. A colossal warship, dwarfing even their largest vessels. It was dark, with strange designs covering its surface, and its weapons were unlike anything the Overlords had ever encountered. The human Dreadnought moved forward with relentless precision, its engines glowing a deep crimson as it cut through the darkness of space. "Prepare the fleet for battle," the lead strategist ordered, his voice shaking with both fear and anger. "This is no ordinary enemy. This is a threat to everything we've built." The Overlords were faced with the reality of their situation. This was no ordinary challenge. The human dreadnought was real, and it was heading straight toward them. The tension in the room was thick. The overlords had never felt fear before, but now, for the first time, they felt it creeping into their hearts. Could they stop this unstoppable force, or had their reign finally come to an end? As the human dreadnought approached, the overlords knew one thing for sure. They had never faced an enemy like this, and they were about to find out just how powerful the humans really were. The arrival of the human dreadnought. As the human dreadnought slowly advanced through the galaxy, the overlords were left in a state of disbelief. The ship's approach was a calculated and steady march. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. It was as though the ship knew it was unstoppable, and that knowledge sent a chill down the spines of the overlords. Inside their command center, the overlords' fear shifted to anger. How could such a small, insignificant race have built something so powerful? They had thought humanity weak, their primitive ships easily destroyed in the past. But this was a different story altogether. The overlords' ships, massive and heavily armed, were no match for the dreadnought. Each ship they sent to intercept it was destroyed in seconds, wiped out with an almost casual display of superior weaponry. The overlords had spent countless centuries building their empire with strength and fear, but now they saw that their power was meaningless in the face of the humans' creation. "We can't allow this to continue," shouted one of the overlords as they watched the carnage unfold on the holographic map. "This human ship must be destroyed, or our entire empire will fall." Desperation filled the air. The overlords, known for their calm and composed demeanor, now found themselves scrambling to figure out how to stop a threat they could barely understand. Every tactic they tried was useless. The human dreadnought's weapons cut through their fleets like a hot knife through butter. The overlords had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. "This cannot be possible," another overlord said quietly, barely able to comprehend the scale of their loss. "We've seen nothing like this, ever." The dreadnought continued to advance, leaving the overlords' fleets in ruins. The ship was now in the heart of their territory, where the most important star systems resided. It was moving with precision, not just attacking, but systematically dismantling the overlords' power. Their once feared empire was being torn apart in real time, and the overlords didn't know how to stop it. One of the overlords, the highest ranking among them, called for a meeting with the council. It was clear that they could not defeat the humans with their current forces. The time for arrogance had passed. They needed to consider a new plan. "The human ship is not just a ship," the highest-ranking overlord stated, his voice trembling slightly for the first time in centuries. "It is a symbol of their strength. If we don't stop it now, we will lose everything we've built." He paused, looking around at the worried faces of his council. For the first time in their lives, the overlords felt vulnerable. They were used to controlling the galaxy, but now the balance of power was shifting, and they were not in control. The human dreadnought did not stop. It moved deeper into their space, unstoppable. But the overlords, desperate to maintain their rule, made one final attempt. They gathered their most advanced warships, the finest technology their empire had ever created, and prepared for a final stand. "We will make them regret ever setting foot in our galaxy," the lead strategist said, his voice cold but filled with determination. "We are the masters here. We will prove that nothing, no one, can challenge us." But as they watched the human ship approach, they began to realize just how much they had underestimated humanity. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy, and the humans had no intention of backing down. A display of power. The overlords' last-ditch efforts to prepare for battle were frantic. Their finest fleets were assembled, their most advanced warships ready for what was shaping up to be the most crucial confrontation in the history of their empire. The once unshakable confidence they had in their superiority was now replaced with doubt and fear. The dreadnought, with its dark and imposing silhouette, loomed ever closer, its engines humming ominously as it sliced through the galaxy. The Overlords, in their desperation, gathered their remaining fleets to face the approaching menace. Yet, no one could deny the sinking feeling in their hearts. Nothing they had was enough to match the sheer power of the human ship. As the human dreadnought neared the core of their territory, the Overlord ships took their positions. Weapons were charged, shields were raised, and every commander held their breath. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Would the Overlords prove their supremacy, or would humanity's unknown strength overcome them? Without warning, the human ship fired. The first shot tore through the nearest Overlord vessel with shocking precision, sending it spiraling into space in a fiery explosion. The Overlord's fleets didn't even have time to retaliate before a second blast from the Dreadnought's cannons hit another flagship, disabling it completely. It was clear now. The human ship wasn't just strong, it was perfectly designed for combat. Impossible, one of the Overlord commanders gasped, watching in horror as more of their fleet was obliterated with every passing second. The power of the human dreadnought's weapons was unlike anything they had ever seen. No amount of shields or armor could withstand the force of its firepower. The dreadnought moved with chilling precision. It wasn't just firing randomly. Each strike was targeted and devastating. It seemed to know exactly where to hit. The Overlord's ships, despite their size and firepower, were outclassed. The dreadnought's advanced weaponry seemed to anticipate every move, shutting down their strongest attacks before they could even launch. How is this possible? A panicked officer muttered as another Overlord ship disappeared in a flash of light. Their technology. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. The Overlords had fought countless battles in their long history, but nothing prepared them for this. They could not comprehend how such a small race, humanity, had managed to build a machine of such power. They had assumed that humanity's primitive fleets were insignificant, that they were too small to challenge the mighty Overlords. But now, their assumptions lay shattered before them. With a terrifying display of power, the human dreadnought fired again, and an entire formation of Overlord ships was reduced to nothing more than debris. The Overlords were left reeling. The once proud fleet of the greatest empire in the galaxy now looked like a collection of helpless, crumbling ships. The Overlords attempted to regroup, trying to form new strategies and counterattacks, but each move was quickly countered by the dreadnought's perfect precision. It was as though the human ship had anticipated every move, every strategy, before they could even begin to carry it out. In the midst of the chaos, one Overlord finally spoke the words that everyone had been thinking. This is not a battle. This is a massacre. And indeed, it felt like one. The human dreadnought was not just destroying their fleet. It was breaking the very foundation of their empire. The Overlords realized, with growing dread, that they were not just facing a superior fleet. They were facing a revolution, a force that would not stop until they had redefined the galaxy's power structure. For the first time in their reign, the Overlords understood that their strength, their technology, and their centuries of dominance meant nothing in the face of a single human ship. And the most terrifying realization of all, the humans had no intention of stopping. As the dreadnought continued its march, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake, the Overlords could do nothing but watch in helpless horror. The universe they had carefully controlled for so long was slipping through their fingers, and they knew they had no way of stopping it. The dreadnought's unstoppable force. The galaxy, once dominated by the Galactic Overlords, was now trembling under the might of the human dreadnought. The Overlords, who had long been the unquestioned rulers of the cosmos, were finally starting to realize the full scope of their miscalculation. The dreadnought wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of something far larger, the unstoppable will of humanity. With each passing moment, the Overlords watched in disbelief as their greatest ships were torn apart. The dreadnought moved like a shadow through the vastness of space, its enormous frame cutting through the Overlords' fleets with a cold, deliberate force. Every shot fired was perfectly aimed, every movement calculated. The Dreadnought was unstoppable. The Overlords had gathered their last reserves, an armada of their most powerful ships, some considered to be the pinnacle of galactic engineering. These ships, with their massive weapons and near-impenetrable shields, had been designed to defeat any foe. Yet, no matter how many they sent, the human Dreadnought destroyed them one by one. It was as though the Overlords had no understanding of how to fight this new kind of war. Their fleet, once mighty and invincible, was now crumbling in real time. "We have to stop it," one of the Overlords screamed, watching the devastation unfold before their eyes. "Send in everything we have." The last of their ships launched, desperate to halt the human Dreadnought's progress. It was their final chance. If this didn't work, they would lose everything. But the Dreadnought, with its unmatched precision and firepower, tore through their last line of defense. The Overlord's fleet was no more. It was like watching a giant collapse under the weight of its own hubris. They had thought themselves invincible. Now they were proving just how fragile their power truly was. The human ship didn't even slow down. It moved forward, cutting through the galaxy's core with ease, heading directly for the heart of the Overlord's empire, the central system, the jewel of their entire reign. It was a place that had never known fear, a place where only the Overlords had ever been in control. But now, it would be the site of the humans' greatest triumph. On the Overlord command station, the officers were on edge, sweating, panicking. They had never seen their leaders so unsettled. The once unshakable rulers of the galaxy were now uncertain, unsure of how to proceed. They had never faced anything like this before. "Where are the reinforcements?" asked one officer, his voice barely a whisper. The Overlords had called in all their backup, but none of it was reaching them in time. The Dreadnought's advance was too swift. The humans had planned this meticulously. "We have to make contact with their leaders," said another Overlord, fear creeping into their voice. "We need to negotiate. There's no other way." The idea of negotiation was laughable to many of the Overlords. For centuries, they had ruled with iron fists, conquering systems, wiping out entire species without so much as a second thought. To beg for mercy from humans was something they could hardly bring themselves to consider. But now, they were faced with the harsh truth. The humans were not afraid of them. They were not even impressed. They were just moving forward, relentlessly, with a single goal in mind. And the Overlords knew they had nothing left to stop them. The human Dreadnought continued its course, now only a few systems away from the central world. The Overlords, at this point, could do little more than watch, helpless and paralyzed by the overwhelming force they had failed to comprehend. The cold reality set in. There was no military strategy, no weapon powerful enough to stand against the human Dreadnought. And worse, the humans had no intention of retreating. The Overlords could not fathom the idea of losing control, and yet they could already see it happening. The galaxy was changing, and they were powerless to stop it. For the first time in centuries, the Overlords were not the ones in control of the galaxy. The humans had come, and they had proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, was invincible. Desperation sets in. The galaxy, once under the complete control of the Galactic Overlords, was now a battlefield of shattered fleets and crumbling power. Desperation seeped into every corner of the Overlord Empire. They had always prided themselves on their unmatched strength, their supreme technology, and their unchallenged rule. But now, as they stared at the growing destruction, they realized that nothing they had could stop the human Dreadnought. The force that was once just a myth, an underdog story, had become a reality, one that was swiftly dismantling everything they had built. The Overlords, once proud and confident in their rule, were now shaken. There were no longer any easy solutions. They had tried everything, sending fleets, using their most advanced technologies, and calling in reinforcements. Nothing had worked. The human Dreadnought tore through their forces like a scythe through wheat, leaving devastation in its wake. "How did we let this happen?" one of the Overlords asked in disbelief, staring at the destruction unfolding on the command center's holographic map. We were supposed to be untouchable. It was a question that none of them had an answer to. How had they overlooked the human threat? For so long, they had believed the humans to be insignificant, weak, and incapable of challenging the might of their empire. But now, they saw the truth. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, their ingenuity, and their strength. The humans weren't just fighting to conquer. They were fighting to end the reign of the Overlords once and for all. With each passing moment, the Overlords felt the grip on their empire slipping away. Their pride, their arrogance, had blinded them to the truth. And now, the cost was clear. Their empire was on the brink of collapse. "We need to negotiate," one of the Overlords said quietly, the words hanging in the air. It was a suggestion that no one had dared speak aloud until now. The idea of negotiating with humans, of surrendering to them, was almost unthinkable. The Overlords had always been the ones who dictated terms, never the ones to beg for mercy. But the reality of their situation left them with no other option. A cold silence fell over the room. The idea of surrender was too much for some to bear. For centuries, they had crushed rebellion with ease, destroying any force that dared to rise against them. Now they were faced with the impossible, a force they could not defeat, a force that was beyond their understanding, beyond their control. "Send a message," one Overlord finally said, his voice tight with both fear and anger. "We will offer them terms. We will not be wiped out without a fight." The Overlords quickly sent a transmission, offering peace. They promised to submit, to offer humanity control over the galaxy, but only if the humans agreed to spare their lives and their empire. They offered everything they had, their fleets, their resources, their technologies, all in exchange for survival. But deep down, they knew the truth. It wasn't a matter of survival anymore. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to make deals. They were here to take what they had claimed as their own: the galaxy, the future, the power. As the message was sent, the Overlords sat in tense silence, waiting for a response. Would the humans accept their surrender, or would they finish what they had started? The Dreadnought moved ever closer to the heart of the Overlord Empire. It showed no signs of slowing, no signs of mercy. The Overlords' last-ditch effort to hold onto their power was now in the hands of the humans. And as they waited, they realized the terrifying truth: they had no more control. The humans were in charge now, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Human strategy revealed. The message was sent. The Overlords waited with bated breath, hoping against hope that humanity would show mercy. They had offered everything they could think of: resources, technology, vast territories, all in exchange for survival. Their once immense power now lay in the hands of the humans, and they prayed that the Dreadnought would show some sign of hesitation, some sign of weakness. But what they didn't know was that the humans had no interest in bargaining. As the Overlords anxiously awaited a response, their worst fear came true. The human Dreadnought did not slow, did not falter. It continued its calculated march toward the central system, unrelenting and unmoved by their desperate plea. The Overlord's message had been ignored. What the Overlords didn't understand was that the humans weren't here for a simple victory or territorial gain. They weren't interested in just claiming a planet or forcing a few concessions. No, the humans had come with a far greater purpose, a purpose that the Overlords had failed to grasp until now. In the depths of their command center, the Overlords' minds began to unravel. The human Dreadnought wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to end an era of oppression, to break the chains of countless species who had suffered under the Overlords' rule. The Dreadnought was not an isolated ship. It was a symbol of the human revolution that had already begun. The human fleet was not just focused on military dominance. It was working as part of a larger strategy to free the galaxy from the Overlord's grip. The Dreadnought had been the first step. What followed would be a galaxy-wide movement that would sweep through the Overlord's empire, bringing an end to their reign and restoring freedom to those they had long oppressed. The overlords realized, too late, that they had missed the most crucial detail of all. The humans did not just want power. They wanted liberation. For themselves, and for every species that had been crushed under the overlord's heel. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit, and now they were paying the price. The human strategy was far more complex than the overlords had imagined. They had assumed that the humans' actions were limited to their own ship, their own fleet. But as the Dreadnought advanced, the overlords began to see the larger picture unfold before them. Humanity had been planning this for years, silently and meticulously, preparing for the day when they would rise and take back their freedom. The overlords' communications started to pick up strange transmissions from planets that had once been under their control. At first, they dismissed them as insignificant, but as more and more messages flooded in, the truth began to hit. Entire systems, once fully under the overlords' domination, were now rising up. Rebellions, uprisings, and revolutions were spreading faster than the overlords could respond. And in the heart of it all stood the human Dreadnought, leading the charge. The overlords' control of the galaxy was crumbling faster than they could react. For centuries, they had held absolute power, but they had never considered that the people they had oppressed would one day rise up. Now, it was happening. The human Dreadnought was the spark that ignited a revolution that was sweeping across the stars. The humans were not just fighting to conquer. They were fighting for freedom, for the future, and for the galaxy itself. The overlords were realizing, with bitter clarity, that their empire was not being defeated by force alone. It was being dismantled by the very spirit of the oppressed, led by the humans and their indomitable will. The overlords, once the rulers of all, now found themselves on the defensive, scrambling to maintain control over a galaxy they could no longer dominate. The human strategy had succeeded beyond their worst fears. The end of the overlord's reign had come, not in the form of one great battle, but in a series of revolutions, each one fueled by the humans' unwavering belief in their cause. As the human Dreadnought closed in on the central system, the overlords finally understood the full scope of what they had been up against. They had underestimated not just the humans, but the power of unity and freedom. They had believed their empire was invincible, but the humans had shown them otherwise. And now, it was too late to stop it. The final confrontation. The human Dreadnought had reached the heart of the overlord's empire. It loomed over the central system like a harbinger of doom, its massive frame casting a long shadow over the once unshakable empire. The overlord's remaining forces had gathered for one last stand, but deep inside, they all knew the truth. This would not be a battle they could win. The overlords had tried everything. They had used their most powerful weapons, called upon reinforcements, and even offered peace, but nothing had worked. The human Dreadnought was a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. It had shattered their fleets, undermined their power, and sparked rebellions across the galaxy. The overlords had no choice but to face the inevitable. Inside their command center, the atmosphere was tense. The highest-ranking overlord stood at the front, his expression grim. He had seen his empire crumble before his eyes, and now he faced the most difficult decision of his life. The humans were at the gates, and there was no retreat. This was the final moment, the end of everything they had worked for. Prepare for the final assault. The highest-ranking overlord commanded, his voice steady despite the storm of fear that raged within him. We will not go down without a fight. The overlord's remaining fleets surged forward, their weapons primed and ready. It was a desperate attack, one last effort to push back the human Dreadnought, to regain control of their empire. But the humans were prepared. The Dreadnought's weapons powered up with a hum, and its advanced targeting systems locked onto the overlord ships with cold precision. Without a moment's hesitation, the human Dreadnought unleashed its full might. The first volley of shots tore through the overlord ships with terrifying accuracy, disabling one flagship after another. The overlords fought back, launching their most devastating weapons, but the human ship seemed to anticipate every move. Every strike was neutralized before it could land. The battle raged on, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Overlord's ships were scattered, overwhelmed by the superior technology and unrelenting firepower of the human Dreadnought. Their forces were breaking apart, one by one. As the Dreadnought moved through their lines with terrifying ease, the Overlords, who had once commanded the galaxy with fear and might, were now reduced to fleeing from a single human ship. In the midst of the chaos, the highest-ranking Overlord realized the truth. They had already lost. The humans weren't just defeating them in battle. They were dismantling their entire empire, piece by piece. The once proud rulers of the galaxy were now powerless, helpless against the overwhelming force of the humans' determination. In the command center, the Overlords gathered for one final attempt. The highest-ranking Overlord stood before them, the weight of his centuries of power now a distant memory. "We must offer surrender," he said, his voice cracking. "There is no other way. We cannot win this fight." The message was sent. The Overlords offered their final terms, a complete surrender. They would submit to human rule, abandon their empire, and leave the galaxy to the humans. They begged for mercy, but the humans showed none. The offer was ignored. The human Dreadnought approached the central world, the heart of the Overlord Empire, without hesitation. It entered the atmosphere, its engines glowing a fierce red as it descended toward the surface. The Overlord's capital city, the symbol of their reign, now lay in the shadow of human power. The humans had come not to destroy, but to claim what was rightfully theirs. They had come to liberate the galaxy, to bring an end to the Overlord's tyranny. The capital city of the Overlords burned beneath the human Dreadnought as the Overlords watched from the command center, their hearts heavy with defeat. As the final remnants of their empire crumbled, the Overlords understood that their reign had come to an end. They had been defeated not just by superior weapons or tactics, but by the will of a people who refused to be oppressed any longer. The galaxy had changed, and the Overlords had no place in it anymore. With their last breath, the Overlords looked out at the galaxy they once ruled, now forever transformed. The humans had shown them the true meaning of strength, not in domination, but in resilience, in freedom, and in the unwavering belief that they could create a better future for all. And in that moment, the Overlords realized their legacy would be nothing more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy, overshadowed by the rise of humanity. The humans had won.